Jai Mahamaya ki jai, Vishveshwari Mata ki jai, Bole Baba ki jai. In our last discourse, we heard about the highest knowledge of Brahma. And we'll move on now to chapter 37. The Himalayas said, "O Mother, now describe your Bhakti Yoga, by which ordinary men who have no dispassion get the knowledge of Brahma easily." The Devi said, "O Chief of Mountains, there are 3 paths widely known leading to the final liberation, moksha. They are Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. Of these 3, Bhakti Yoga is the easiest in all respects. People can do it very well without incurring any suffering to the body and bringing the mind to a perfect concentration. This Bhakti devotion, again, is of 3 kinds, as the gunas are 3. His Bhakti Yoga is tamasic, who worships me to pain others, being filled with vanity and jealousy and anger. That Bhakti is rajasic, when one worships me for one's own welfare and does not intend to do harm to others. He who has got some desire or end in view, some fame, or is to attain some objects of enjoyments and ignorantly and thinking himself different from me, worship me with greatest devotion." Again, that bhakti is sattvic, when anybody worships me to purify his sins and offers to me the results of all the karmas, thinking that Jiva and Ishvara are separate and knowing that this action of his is authorized in the Vedas and therefore must be observed. The sattvic bhakti is different from the supreme bhakti, as the worshippers think of me separate, but it leads to the supreme bhakti. The other 2 bhaktis do not lead to the supreme bhakti. Now hear attentively about the para-bhakti that I am now describing to you, which is the highest bhakti. He who hears always my glories and recites my names, and whose mind dwells always like the incessant flow of oil in me, who is the receptacle of all auspicious qualities and gunas. But he has not the least trace of any desire to get the fruits of his karma. He does not want other forms of liberations. He becomes filled with devotion for me alone, worships me only, knows nothing higher than to serve me, and he does not want final liberation even. He does not like to forsake the idea of seva, being of service, or sevaka, being a servant who serves. He also meditates on me with a constant vigilance, and actuated by a feeling of supreme devotion, he does not think himself separate from me, but rather thinks himself that I am the Bhagavati. He considers all the jivas as myself and loves me as he loves himself. He does not make any difference between the jivas and myself, as he finds the same Chaitanya everywhere and manifested in all. He does not quarrel with anybody, as he has abandoned all ideas with separateness. He bows down and worships the chandalas and all of the jivas. He who becomes filled with devotion of me, whenever he sees my place, my devotees, and hears the sastras describing my deeds, and whenever he meditates on my mantras, he becomes filled with the highest love, and his hairs stand on their ends out of love to me, and tears of love flow incessantly from both his eyes. He recites my names and deeds in a voice choked with the feelings of love. O Lord of the mountains, he worships me with intense feeling as the mother of the universe and the cause of all causes. He performs the daily and occasional duties and all my vows and sacrifices without showing any miserly feeling in his expenditure of money. He naturally longs to perform my festivities and to visit places where my celebrations are held. He sings my name loudly and dances, being intoxicated with my love, and has no idea of egoism and is devoid of his body idea, thinking that the body is not his. He thinks that whatever is done in his previous lifetimes must come to pass, and therefore does not become agitated as to the preservation of his body and soul. This sort of bhakti is called the parabhakti, or the highest devotion. Here the predominant idea is the idea of the Devi, and no other idea takes its place. O mountain, he gets immediately dissolved in my nature of consciousness, whose heart is really filled with such parabhakti, or all love. The sages call the limiting stage of this devotion and dispassion as jnana. When this jnana arrives, bhakti and dispassion gets their end satisfied. He goes then to the Manidvipa when his kara does not crop up by his prarada karma, though he did not fail to give up his life in devotion. O mountain, that man enjoys there all the objects of enjoyments, though unwilling, and at the end of the period gets the knowledge of my consciousness. By that he attains the final liberation forever. Without this jnana, the final liberation is impossible. He realizes Parabrahma, who gets in this body of his, the above jnana of pratak atma, is his heart. When his prana leaves his body, he does not get rebirth. The Shrutis say, he who knows Brahma becomes Brahma. The ignorance vanishes. When this ignorance is destroyed by knowledge, he attains all his knowledge, the object to be attained, when he recognizes the gold on his neck. O Vasta mountains, this my consciousness is different from the perceived pots, etc., and unperceived maya. The image of this param atma is seen in bodies other than the atma, is the image as the image falls in a mirror, as the image falls in water. To this Paramatma is seen as the shadow and lights are quite distinct. So in my Manidvipa, the knowledge of oneness without a second arises. That man resides in the Brahmaloka for the period of a kalpa, who leaves his body without attaining jnana, though he has had his vargyan. Then he takes his birth in the family of a pure, prosperous family, and practicing again his yoga habits gets my consciousness. O King of Mountains, this jnana arises after many births. It does not come in one birth. So one should try one's best to get this jnana. If attaining this rare human birth, one does not attain this jnana, know that a great calamity has befallen to him. For this human birth is very hard to attain, and then the birth in a Brahmin family is rare. Moreover, amongst the Brahmins, the knowledge of the Vedas. The attaining of the 6 qualities, which are considered as 6 wells, restrainer of passions, the success in yoga, and the acquisition of pure, real guru, all these are very hard to attain in this life. O mountain, the maturity and the activities of the organs of the senses and the purification of the body according to the Vedic rites are all very difficult to attain. Know this again, that to get a desire for final liberation is acquired by the merits acquired in many births. That man's birth is entirely futile, who, attaining all the above qualifications, does not try his best to attain that jnana. So one should try one's best to do this. Then at every moment he gets the fruits of the Ashvamedha sacrifice. There is no doubt in this. As ghee resides potentially in milk, so the Vijnana Brahma resides in every body. So make the mind the churning rod and always churn with it. Then by slow degrees the knowledge of Brahma will be attained. Man attains blessedness when he gets the jnana of the Vedantas. Gets this jnana. So the Vedanta says, I have described to you in brief, O King of the Mountains, all that you wanted to hear. Now what more would you want? Here ends the 37th chapter of the 7th book of the glories of the Bhakti of the Mahapuranam, Srimad Devi Bhagavatam, 18,000 verses by Maharishi Veda Vyasa. Jai Mahamaya ki jai, Vishveshwari Mata ki jai, Bole Baba ki jai.